It is my honor to present. Can everyone still see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. To present the fourth coffee table talk session, Indigenous and Ancestral Approaches to Ecological Care. At New Women Connectors, which is the leading organization for this project. Together we lead together for our Earth, our Europe, our future. We're a nonprofit organization led by migrant and refugee women working towards systemic change in policy and practices. One way that we do that is through these online roundtable sessions, through trainings, and through work that foregrounds these principles of intersectional feminism, anti-racism, human rights, democratic governance, and migration. This project specifically that we're working on is surrounding climate justice. And one of the reasons that we wanted to have other people on and speaking about their personal experiences around climate justice is so that we can demystify and kind of take some of the jargon out from the climate movement and make it more accessible to people with a variety of lived experiences, maybe not only looking at statistics and numbers, but also the lives that are impacted surrounding climate justice and climate change.
Sorry, Angie, we can't see the presentation.
Oh
Only you.
no. Okay, okay.
But it's
Then
okay if it's not possible because it was very,
yeah, there we go. We can see it now.
yes.
Yes.
Yay, yes.
Organizers for today are myself, who I already gave a bit of an introduction, and now I'm going to hand it over to Aminata, Amy, if you would also like to give a little
Yeah,
introduction.
thank you so much. Thank you, Angeline, and thank you, New Woman Connector, for this trust and for the collaboration. So I'm Aminata. I'm driving Ecologie Universelle. It's a nonprofit organization, an IUCN member, and we work across West Africa and Europe. And our organization works on biodiversity conservation, agriculture, regenerative, and environmental education. So we use also to work on how cultural heritage can also implementate all the work on biodiversity laws and climate justice. I'm very happy also to moderate this space, this coffee table with amazing women. So thank you so much being here today.
Thank you. Maybe before I go to the speakers, I'll just give a little disclaimer that there's also interpretation in French available for this session. So if you're in the session and you're interested in hearing all of these next bits in French instead of in English, if that's more comfortable for you, you can find the interpretation button on the bottom of your screen, click it, and then click French. And then you should be able to hear Michelle instead of me. And she'll clear up, everything in French instead. So without further ado, also, Michelle, if I'm ever talking too fast, please give a little wave or something, or let me know in the chat. All right, then maybe let's start handing it over to our speakers for the day. If you would like to go first, Stacy, and give a little introduction.
Sure, no problem. Okay, so what I can do is I'll give a little introduction. I'm not sure if this is the time I should share any slides, but I'll introduce myself right now. So as you can see, my name is Stacy Alvarez de la Campa. I'm a legal and educational consultant and an environmental activist. And my background is in literature and linguistics, law, education, and climate justice. I have a master's degree currently in island studies, and I specialize in Indigenous climate adaptation. I myself am of Indigenous heritage of the Garifuna people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and I'm seeking to improve the representation of Indigenous and marginalized voices in discussions about climate justice and the way that how important our lived experience is and how important it is to listen to our stories and learn together. And I founded an NGO called Climate Rights and Justice International, Inc. So that's a little bit about me.
Oh, you still mute, Angeline. Thank you so much, Stacy.
Thank
You
you
can
so
go.
much for being here.
It's fine.
All right. Maybe Samira, would you like to go next?
Yes, I can go next. Hi, everybody. My name is Samira Ben Ali. I'm from an island that is called Mayotte. It's just next to Madagascar. And I'm a climate justice advocate and campaigner, especially working with an organization that is called World Youth for Climate Justice. And basically, my work is at the intersection of human rights, climate, and international law. And I've been mostly working around the recent, maybe you've heard of them, advisory opinions on climate, so legal documents that have been produced by courts and tribunal on climate, trying to make sure that the youth perspective is in there and also the indigenous, obviously. And I'll be talking about that during this presentation, actually. So I hope that you'll be able to learn if you don't already know about it. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much. We just have Gabriella. She's coming. She just asked me the link.
I
Thank you
just let her
so
into the
much,
room.
Samira. I'm very happy to have you here. Yes, maybe Angeline, you want to go or can I just continue? It's okay.
Go ahead. Gabriella should just be, yep, entering right now.
Yeah.
Welcome, Gabriella, our third speaker.
hmm
I'll give her maybe a moment to get settled in, and then whenever you're ready, Gabriella, you can give a little introduction of yourself.
Yes.
But maybe for now, Amy, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want also to share the idea behind this round table and behind this coffee table. It brings together voice from Africa, Caribbean, Latin America, and it's and Europe also. To explore indigenous and ancestral approaches to ecological care. So the discussion will focus on lived experience, community knowledge, and territorial practice, aiming to reconnect climate action with grounded realities. So this is a conversation based also on your experience, and it will be very interesting to have an amazing moment with you. I don't know if Gabriella is here, so if she's here, we can give her the floor to introduce herself.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
So sorry I'm late. I'm Gabriela Afaiwa from Ghana, and it's really nice to be here today to listen to everyone and to share my insights on whatever discussion we have today. I'm looking forward to an insightful discussion. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So we can start with Samira for individual question. Samira, how indigenous and territorial knowledge influence global climate governance and justice framework? You hear me, Samira?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm just having a bit of connection issue. Sorry
Yeah, we
about that.
understand. No problem.
Okay. Can you hear me well? Because I don't see you directly.
Yeah, yes, we
Okay,
hear you
okay.
now.
I'll try to. Okay, great. So that's a really interesting question, and I think it's a really vital question. So I was really happy when I received it. Um, Especially in the work that I'm doing in climate governance, we are trying to make sure that those notions of indigenous and territorial knowledge are really acknowledged. To me, indigenous knowledge and territorial knowledge can really fundamentally reshaped climate governance, not only because it's adding perspective into climate governance, but also because it can redefine solutions, notions of responsibility, and also justice. First and foremost, we can see that those knowledge systems bring different relationships to what we understand on land, or relationship to land and ecosystem in places like Mayotte that I live in, but also in other places, especially I feel across the global south. Local and territorial practices are deeply rooted in long-term observation, notions of interdependence, but also care. And this contrasts with some short-term and extractivist notions of governance that often dominate the global narrative of what should be climate governance, and where sometimes it feels like we're repeating the same mistakes as the one that we did in the past, but just changing the names. So I think that through introduction of indigenous and territorial knowledge, we're changing perspective in how we are approaching governance, and we're trying to have a more holistic and sustainable ways of living with ecosystems. Second, they are very essential to global processes and lived realities, because they are gonna anchor lived realities with governance. And they are also reframing and reshaping the way we can interact with notions like the law. I've been able to see it particularly through my work on the International Court of Justice advisory opinion on climate, as well as the Inter-American Court's advisory opinion on climate. So for those who don't know what those are, the International Court of Justice is considered as the highest court in the world. It's a judiciary body of the UN, United Nations, and it can produce, if asked for, a document that is a legal document that is reshaping or reframing international law if needed. And they produced back in July of last year, through push of civil society across the world, and especially youth, a document that was on the obligations of states when it comes to climate change. And in that particular document, it was really interesting because it was rooted on it has heavy part on indigenous people as being caregivers, and as needing special kind of understanding and protection, in the sense that the ICG mentioned the fact that human rights is extremely important when we think about climate change. And in particular, indigenous people are especially important in that sense. The Inter-American Courts last year also produced an advisory opinion, Inter-American Court of Human Rights produced an advisory opinion that was also, that went even deeper into the importance of indigenous knowledge. It mentions the fact that indigenous people are disproportionately impacted by harm, and they're especially vulnerable communities, but also that when talking about climate change and when making climate related decisions, it was important to recognize the collective and territorial dimensions of indigenous rights and of indigenous people as knowledge holder, and to go and ensure that there is a freer, prior, and informed consent when taking any measure that could affect indigenous lands. So we're seeing that through advocacy and through knowledge sharing, indigenous and local knowledge can be completely integrated in a meaningful way in legal frameworks and general climate governance frameworks. So we're seeing that in third, that indigenous and local knowledge play a really critical role in redefining justice, because climate justice framework often rely on universal categories, but indigenous and territorial perspective highlight issues like historical responsibility, cultural roles, and relational rights. through those knowledge, we can focus not only on compensation, but on notions like restoration, protection, and respect of different worldview. And finally, when talking about those kind of knowledge, there is a question of participation and power that is very important to have in mind, because it's not enough to only include indigenous intellectual knowledge as inputs, but it's really important to share power so that we can actually reshape decision making. So those were some of the points that I've been able to see and highlight throughout my work on legal frameworks of climate justice. So, but I'm really looking forward to hear more about a different perspective.
Thank you so much, Samira. It was amazing to learn more about your work and about also how the thing is going at the international level. And also, if I can also add something or share my experiences at the biodiversity framework when we talk about the importance of indigenous people. We know today that more than 80% of the biodiversity is protected by the indigenous people. So maybe it will be a matter of implementation because we know about that. The international framework put it on their some documents, and so we're still struggling about the implementation. So I think during this discussion we will also learn more how to implement it better, this and give more space and a very important space to the indigenous and Afro-descendant people. So let's move to Stacy. Stacy, during your introduction, you talk about the Garifuna community. Can you just talk more about this
Sure.
community in Barbados? Because you are from Barbados, you are in Barbados now.
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah, I really think it will be really interesting for us to know more about this
Sure.
community.
Sure, I'll say a bit more about the Garifuna community. So the Garifuna community actually originates from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a small island group in the Caribbean, and that's where I'm from. I'm currently living in Barbados, but I'm originally from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And the Garifuna people can be considered a lovely melting pot of the enslaved Africans and the indigenous Kalinago people who were in the Eastern Caribbean at the time. And I also have Maroon ancestry because my mom is Jamaican and Maroon. So I like to say that I'm inter-Caribbean. I am just in every part. But I would say that the nice thing about Garifuna and many indigenous knowledge systems it's the sense of community and the way that educational systems and ways of being together are founded in a way of collaborating. They're founded in sharing intergenerational spaces. So it's not a matter of separating people, and it's not a matter of categorizing knowledge or trying to define knowledge. It's a matter of experiential knowledge and experiential learning, which is something that I think is very important for us to consider when we think of how do we reshape educational systems and educational landscapes so that they no longer represent a microcosm of colonization, because that is something that a lot of people who are Afro-descendant and a lot of people in the global South who are living in places that were colonized. In theory, places are independent and no longer colonized, but that colonization lives in the systems that were created by colonization. So we see that many educational systems, many learning systems are based on fear. They're based on competition, and they're based on trying to feel a sense of self-worth and validation through a grade, a mark, or making someone like you or making or looking up to someone, where in indigenous knowledge systems and in Garifuna ways of learning, it's a lot more about collaboration, and it's a lot more about seeing what is the mutual exchange of learning that can happen. And the way that this relates particularly to climate justice is that climate justice is not an abstract concept. Climate justice is something that is affecting us every day. So, you think about asking the question, what is justice really? And justice is often about if something has gone wrong, how can that be repaired? How can it be that I can become the version of myself that I could have been without this intervention of, let's say, in this instance, it's climate change, right? And this is something that we have to look at doing together. This is not something that we can have an extractivist or even what I like to say, a mindset that's based in too much of an exchange, right? It has to be something that's based in reciprocity and based in that we can all learn from each other. And when we are making people more aware of how climate change is impacting Indigenous communities like the Garifuna, often we're on the front lines of where climate change, places that are hardest hit. So somewhere like St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where most of the Indigenous communities are in the coastal areas. And even these areas, I mean, at one point we occupied the whole of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, right? We then experienced a kind of internal and external exile. We were exiled to a small island in the Grenadines called Baliso. There we suffered horrific genocide. And then internally in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we were resettled to the coastal regions, and then many of us were exiled to places like Honduras, Nicaragua, etc. So there are many aspects of climate justice. So there's the reparatory aspect that, okay, how are you going to repair the damage? But these reparations are also, they're psychological, they're cultural, they're historical. So we have to think of all the ways that we can come together to make this happen. And that's what I would say, an Indigenous way of thinking or Indigenous knowledge systems, we see climate justice as something that's based in lived experience, it's based on cooperation, and it's based on learning from each other. So that's just a little bit of what I'll say. Thank you all so much for the opportunity. Please feel free to put questions in the chat if anyone has any questions.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Thank you for all this amazing information that we don't use to have on there from the Indigenous community from the Caribbean. So thank you so much also. So I have a second question for you. You talk about the Indigenous knowledge. So today, how how we can shape the climate awareness and education, especially among young generation. Because when you introduce yourself, you talk about education. Can you go more on
Sure.
that, please?
Sure. Actually, what I'll look to do is see if I can share my screen, if that's going to be okay. And I can share a little presentation that I put together in that regard. Thank you so much. So I'll just put it in present mode. Okay, so that's an introduction to myself, but you all already know me by now. I'd like to think we're good friends. So in terms of Indigenous knowledge systems and how do they shape climate awareness and education, particularly amongst younger generations, I think it's important to start to have some areas of focus. That's the first point. So the first point is Indigenous knowledge systems will focus on some particular things. So, for example, we look at things like marine plastic pollution in the context of ocean literacy and climate change, because fossil fuels that produce the plastics are really at the heart of what I think is driving greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. We then see how we can link this to education and youth advocacy, because the concept of advocacy is really, it's a learned skill. It's not just something that exists. You have to learn how to harness it and learn how to use it best. And then just talking generally about Indigenous knowledge systems. And one of the things about Indigenous knowledge systems, they are intersectional in nature. So we don't necessarily separate art, science, and things like that. Everything is connected. And I think that's something that when we embrace that, we will see how climate change is connected to so many other things that are happening to Indigenous people and in the world. So the way I support education in schools when I look at climate awareness and among younger generations is that look at, as I said, we view plastic production and then fossil fuel production as a key driver of climate change. And climate change is linked then to marine and other biodiversity loss and public health issues. That's something we have to be aware of. People are suffering as a direct result of climate change, whether it's heat stroke, whether it's the presence of microplastics in water and microplastics in the ocean because ocean temperatures are rising and that's causing marine plastic pollution in the ocean to degrade. These are some things we have to be aware of, and we have to advocate for what I think is systemic change. So there's change that's at a level where I might change what I am doing, but we have to then link this to a broader, wider systemic change and see how can we link the two. And I believe that talking to each other and sharing our lived experience and then seeing how can we bridge that gap between people on the ground and policymakers and other members of civil society. How do we create change? And I think that's one of the ways that this can happen. And we have to conduct research that's quantitative and qualitative in nature and that harkens to an Indigenous way of thinking. So research isn't just extractive. It's not just about collecting data. You have to recognize that there are people, faces, and voices behind the numbers. What's the narrative? What's the story that you're looking to highlight? And that's something that we look to do. And that links us into strategic advocacy, that ocean literacy, like climate change, it's a multi-generational topic. It's a multi-generational issue. And young people tend to be innovative and powerful, particularly when we let young people have a voice. Let young people use that voice. Let young people express themselves. And we as older people, well, myself as older, I wouldn't say anyone else on this call is necessarily old, but I would say that myself as an older person, I can see what can I learn from young people and how can we just work together? And how can I, as someone older, how can I mentor younger people? Because younger people are future decision makers, they're the entrepreneurs, the citizens, and it's important that we equip young people and empower young people. And through that, that's something that's very important in Indigenous knowledge systems. That idea of passing the baton, passing the torch on, passing the knowledge to younger generations rather than hoarding that knowledge to myself. Because if I don't leave a legacy of knowledge, I don't think I could have made a difference in the world. So that leads me to the idea of Indigenous foundations of climate justice, because climate justice is something that it's impacting us because we're on the front lines of climate change. And when we can raise awareness about that by sharing our stories and recognizing that often it's Indigenous people who see the signs of climate change first before those things are, again, data is extracted or put into a lab or created into a policy. We see that first because we see the effect on the biodiversity that surrounds us. We see the effect on ocean temperatures. We see the effect, say, on certain species of fish that we can no longer find because the ocean is too warm. We also see if there's too much coastal development, certain spawning grounds or places that fish would reproduce. We see when those are disappearing. So there's a way that that connection to the environment is something that we have as Indigenous people, and we can encourage younger people to keep hold of that connection to the environment. So I'll round things up, and I just wanted to give some concrete examples of activities that use Indigenous knowledge systems to shape awareness about climate change. So having intergenerational meetings with community elders. I think of my mom, I think, who knows so much, and there are times that she'll just start telling stories, and myself and my son, we just can't help but listen. And for her, it's just a story about her life. But for me, it is this incredible record of things she has seen, things she has known, and it makes me want to honor her by knowing that I can carry on these stories and I can also say, how can I defend the things that she's talking about, whether it's a particular species of plant that's used in a way that's medicinal, whether it's knowledge. She'll talk about her father. He could use a particular type of herb if there were pets who were hurt, this kind of Indigenous traditional medicine could help pets or help other people. So those are the things that I think is important. Have some meetings and discuss the role of the environment. How does that connection to the environment make you feel better? Because in that connection, we see that when we look after the environment, we're looking after ourselves. Then there's also inspiring school or community to have an assembly or have a gathering to talk about climate justice and say, again, demystify it. I heard one of the speakers in the introduction saying, how can we demystify this concept? It means that when we're impacted by climate change, how can we try to make our lives better and how can we help each other to recover? And you can create a poster or you can organize a beach cleanup. And that's something that brings people together. It's always fun and it's a way to learn by just immersing and yourself in the experience and having fun. So that's just a little bit. I mean, I'll say that I think these are ways that Indigenous knowledge systems can definitely shape climate awareness and bring younger people together with older people, and then also just make us realize that we're in this together. So
Thank you
let's
so
learn from each
much.
other. Thank you.
Thank you a lot. So thank you so much, Stacy. So now let's move to Gabriella. Gabriella, so you are engineer and working on coastal and ocean. Can you just share a little bit with us about your work? And you are also from Ghana, and why it's important from Ghana to work on your topic. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Again, I'm Gabriela. I'm currently a PhD student at the University of Ghana, and I work with oysters. And I don't look at the ocean as just a body of water, but as a critical climate um, regulator. I'm sorry, there's another meeting going on, so I hope it's not. Yeah.
It will be okay. No problem.
And I see it as, like I said, I don't see it just as a body of water, but like as a critical climate regulator and how it's like intertwined with human survival. And when we talk about co-creation in the context of ecosystem and restoration, specifically in my work with oyster restoration, I move from the old model of the top-down science thing, and it's not about planting organisms in the lagoons or the estuaries, but it's about social ecological importance. So when we are talking about this field and living in the ocean science space and working as a marine scientist, we don't only look at the science part, but we look at bridging like the knowledge gap between the locals and we the scientists, because we go to the field and we realize that what we would take a week to observe, these locals already can use whatever knowledge they have over time to tell you or predict something that our sensors are going to use like hours to predict, right? So we usually always have to work with them. And also we realize how powerful the data is and how it translates to environmental education as well. So we co-create by ensuring local communities understand the why behind our sciences and not just letting our sciences be on the shelves or without it being able to translate or being understood by any person. We want to do science that is meaningful and that could be understood by anybody. We are talking children to adults, right? And when we are talking about this, we are looking at climate justice through restoration with my work. Again, oysters are like natural coastal defenders. And by restoring these ecosystems, we aren't just hitting carbon targets, and we are protecting the livelihoods of women and families who depend on these waters. In West Africa, for example, oysters are a type of farming that is dominantly or that's women dominantly farm. It's a women dominated farming practice, right? So you see most of the women, not men, harvesting oysters. So when we are not unable to restore these habitats for these oysters, these women have nothing to depend on in terms of feeding their kids, even providing for their families where it needs to be. And this is where climate science meets social justice. And also, sometimes we come to a conclusion that leading means ensuring that African scientists are not just data collectors for global projects. It's become very common that they come in and they're like, oh, there's this gap they don't have. They don't have this data from our region. And they put us to work, take our data, and that's it. We don't even use it for our own systems. We don't use it for innovations in our own countries, and we lag behind while they go forward with our data and model whatever they have to do for their systems. But we encourage that African researchers or scientists are architects of their research, where our goal is to ensure that our edge is our future as well, which includes a strong scientifically backed African voice at the table. Because without the African voice, it's not complete. And in as much as they make us think that our continent is smaller, I don't know if you travel to a lot of African spaces, but you realize how big Africa is, way bigger than what they are making us think it is. So without our knowledge, and even if you look at a lot of innovations that started and everything in the Western countries and all of that, a lot of them had the Black minds behind it, but it's rarely documented sometimes. And how we always have to travel to the West to make it big or to make it because we always have to depend on them. That is not the case. Um, yeah, this is like a table talk organized by women. It's very important that we highlight my work because like I said, it's a women dominated field. And these women in my country, for example, it's really hard for you to even hear anything about oyster cultures or anything about oyster restoration. For us, when we are talking about the tilapias and the other fisheries that the men are mostly into, that is where you see the government always step in to bring out so many policies to protect those fisheries, but nothing protecting the livelihoods of these women in these local communities, which isn't fair to me. I don't think I see any social justice in that. Yeah, so I believe we often make the mistake of viewing indigenous knowledge and marine science as two separate entities, when in reality they are like two sides of the coin. You're just one. If we flip it, we are going to tell the same story. And in my work, I saw that very often. I will always emphasize that indigenous knowledge is very, very important in whatever we do and even in policy that we make and all of that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing this with us and also sharing also your point of view from Africa and from Ghana. It's amazing also. What I also want to ask, so how do coastal and ocean-based community use local knowledge to build resilient and ecological care?
Well, like I said, for the longest time, I've worked with like local communities, and when I'm going for my field work, we usually hire the local people because they know every side or wherever we want to go, the best sampling sites, everything, and they could tell. Like I said, sometimes our sensors will tell us that oh, it's the temperature is this way, or the salinity levels are this way, but it could just taste the water and tell you the salinity level, and it would be very accurate even before you check it on your your sensor. Um, so usually in my lab we call them the traditional scientists because they just don't have degrees, but I see them as scientists because they do a lot of the work and they understand it, but just in their own way. Yeah. So we have in some cases invited them when we go for our conferences or meetings for policy making strategies and all of that to involve them because they usually are the ones who live there and are always there, so they understand the system better than we do. And we are hoping that the collaboration continues. And usually when we talk to them, they feel left out and how people with degrees always look down on them. And sometimes people just come and take their knowledge and then sideline them without giving them any acknowledgements. So even as little as acknowledging them on your research papers or wherever you go to or wherever you stand goes a long way for them to share whatever knowledge they have.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for emphasizing that. Angeline, did you want to ask some question or add something before moving to the next step?
I wanted to reflect actually on something that you mentioned, Gabriella, about this extractivism of knowledge. And I think that's something as New Women Connectors, we do work around meaningful participation. of migrants and refugees. And so this is again the same motif that we kind of experience as well, of like people are invited to a consultation to then get their, let's say, like their victim story told, and then that's taken, and then you never hear what happens with it. You don't hear about, throughout the policy cycle, they're kind of used only on a consultation basis, but then you don't see any meaningful change, and there's no meaningful engagement of the individuals and their knowledge past that, just taking it for the sob story. So I think, yeah, I wanted to kind of echo that that's something that we definitely see in other fields as well. And I think also just furthers the commodification of Black and Brown experiences, because this same kind of extractivism that you were talking about, yeah, we see it mirrored all over. So thank you for also bringing that up, because yeah, it's interesting to see that bridge. Stacy, I see your hand up as well.
Yeah, I was going to really applaud Gabrielle and say thanks so much for the comment and for drawing that to everyone's attention, because it is something where that way of thinking, that transactionality and that extractivism, that's not how Indigenous knowledge systems work. Those are not the paradigms they're based on. It's more about how do I build a relationship with you so that we can together make the world a better place and combine our knowledge to make concrete steps forward. Because what happens too is that even if good work is done from the extractivist and from the transactional exchange, Indigenous communities never know exactly where this knowledge is going. So to me, there should be an effort made to come back to communities and say, well, this is what I looked at. This is what I tried to do. This is what I tried to make it work. It's not a matter of it having to be perfect. It's that you're saying, because seeking knowledge and seeking solutions, it's a lifetime journey, right? So always factor that into your programming when you are going to do something like that. Say, okay, this is a point at which I'm going to go back and I'm going to say, this is what I've gathered. This is how I've used the information. I would love to hear more, because again, there are names and faces and then stories behind the data and the numbers. So thanks for making us realize that, Gabriella.
Thank you so much. And also, if I can add something, is we need also change in science area, because if you, like a scientist, if we go to do some interview in the Indigenous community and find a lot of information, a lot of data, we are not able to put the name of the person who give us this data or who give us this information. And this is how the scientists area and how the scientist world work. And I think we need also to ask more change and more space for Indigenous knowledge and how to implement it. Also, the data that we collect from them, not just to put our name, even if it's I drive the intervention, but it's not my knowledge, it's the knowledge of someone else. So we need also to put their name and to share their how also they use to protect and to continue to preserve the knowledge. Thank you so much. Do you have some questions before moving to the second part? It's okay. I think in the chat, okay. Okay, so let's move to the second part. So I have a collective question for each of you. So I heard a small response on that, but I need you to go deeper on this question. So today, what is currently missing in global climate discussion, in global climate, and I just want to add biodiversity discussion and framework. Who want to start first?
I can go ahead.
Thank you, Samir.
Yeah, for me, there is three main things that are missing in the global climate discussions. First, the one that I'm seeing that is currently missing and that is extremely important is the notion of reparation. I think it's not involved enough. The second one is on colonialism, and the third one is on care and love. Um, on the notion of reparation, I find it extremely strange because I feel like we work around that word. For example, I'm really involved in the COP space where we talk about loss and damage, where we talk about climate finance, things like that. But why are we talking about that actually? We're talking about that because we lost something and we need to repair it. We need to go into the people who have been the most affected and try to make sure that we're being accountable to the harm that has been caused. And if we're not able to name such important word as reparations, who is responsible for what, and who is accountable for what, I'm not sure exactly how we'll be able to advance in these kind of frameworks. I'm saying this especially because I've been able to talk to negotiators, especially from the global north or major polluters, and raising the word of reparation and liability is always something that stop people. And we can see that those words are not really part of the negotiations or the Paris Agreement or things like that. It's always walking around those words. So to me, unless we're able to come back and actually name what we're doing, then it's not really possible to advance fully. The second one that I had mentioned was the issue of colonialism, which I found to be also quite hard to raise in a global conversation, not only on those who were colonies, but also the former perpetrator of colonialism. We can understand why the former perpetrators of colonialism are having a hard time with it. But I found it quite intriguing when I'm having conversation within my own communities sometimes, or communities who have been colonized, where they're having such difficult time to recognize the grief that colonialism has caused and why it's keep on causing harmful systems, where we're not able now to maybe return to a notion of closeness with nature, or we're not able to reattach ourselves with nature. So unless we're able to address the root of the hurt that colonialism has caused, I feel like it's quite hard to advance into repairing harm in the climate discussion. And the last one that I have mentioned was on care and love, which is quite intriguing also in the sense that those words are often considered as soft and gendered words that make you somehow lose credibility when you mention them in your work. It will be completely unthinkable to mention that you are protecting the nature out of love in a grant application, for example, and people will completely dismiss you. But sometimes you just do it out of care and out of love. So how come that we're losing credibility when we mention all of those feelings that we have for natural environment and for essential driving? If we didn't wait for our love first, why would we even do what we're doing? So to me, recentering those words and taking the gendered nature out of them, or taking the softness out of them, because to me they're quite powerful words, right? So re-putting them into their rightful place in the global discussion will be an extremely important element for us to understand how well.
Thank you so much for reminding us how word weight is very important, and to also use the right word to qualify or to say the thing that we really need to do. And I also have the opportunity to participate in the COP as a negotiator, and I know how word is important. And we lost a lot of negotiation because we do not focus on that. And sometimes I think also in the negotiation space, the negotiators are not prepared to understand better the word. We have also the young generation. Michelle is here. She's incredible negotiator from Burkina Faso on agriculture, and she know how word is important. And so thank you so much, Samira, for sharing this with us. Gabriela, I saw you raise your hand. You can go.
Yeah, sorry, that was a mistake, but I'll just go. I had like, I thank you so much for all you said. I think with the global climate change discussions, I think we need to address the missing link, because if we look at the global climate landscape today, there's a clear and dangerous gap between high-level policy and on-the-ground realities. From my perspective as a scientist working in West Africa specifically, there are like some critical elements that are currently missing, like the small-scale financing revolution. I think that now most of the funds that they often look for, like the global climate funds, often look for massive multi-million dollar infrastructure projects. What's missing is accessible micro scale funding for community led restoration. We don't just need giant sea walls, we need the resources to help a local community led restoration, where they can restore a mangrove or even oyster reef in my case. These small scale interventions seem small but have the highest survival rates because they are maintained by the people who live there. Also, recognition of the silent ecosystems. That much of the global conversation is focused on rainforests or the deep ocean, deep open ocean. We often overlook silent coastal ecosystems like the lagoons and estuaries, the rivers, and these are mostly the frontliners of climate change. Yet they receive a fraction of research and conservation funding, and they need to shift that focus to include these high productive zones, because in as much as we're talking about the carbon targets and all of that, I don't know if you know, mangroves have like a very good carbon sinks, just like the deep ocean. But if they are not restored, how else are we going to like take away the carbon that is being um, distributed? And currently, the global climate agenda still feels like it's being exported from the north to the south. And what is truly missing is a circular exchange. It's not just about the North, it's like everybody that is focusing. But sometimes they do some innovations and they come preach to us about the global change where we contribute just like a very tiny fraction of this emission of carbon. But they focus so much on us instead of learning from our models to be able to help them. You know, the global south are already innovating out of necessity. We are already co-creating with indigenous knowledge. The world shouldn't just be helping us. They should be learning from our models of community resilience and bioculture restoration instead of always coming in and feeling like heroes. So I feel like enough with the targets, enough with roadmaps. Like what we are missing is equity to empower local scientists and indigenous leaders to drive the vehicle. Until the person on the ground has the tools to lead, the global plan will continue to stall, and we'll just have these recycled conversations over and over again. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Gabriela. It's amazing. I saw some interaction from Angeline. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, kind of bringing together what both of you, Samira and Gabriella, said. I about the importance of language, and I think that also this is like another way, and I don't think I know that this is just another way that this kind of spaces where power is exercised, it gatekeeps it even further. Because like what you were saying, Samira, about the difference between reparations and loss and damages, I mean, this is just like it's language that's meant to keep a certain group of people feel more comfortable, and it doesn't really affect change. And so choosing to kind of talk around the issue in a way that is making, let's say, the powerful more powerful and the rich richer, it's an active decision that is keeping grassroots individuals that don't maybe have the most like academic background out of the conversation, and it's further concentrating power into this group of people who already have power. So yeah, I just wanted to reflect a bit on that and the importance of, as you said, Gabriella, like meaningful, small scale grassroots targeting funds and opportunities, because also certain parts around the climate movement have become buzzwords. And it's like, look, I'm doing something because I'm continuing to give money to an organization that already has money. We see this also with underfunding, systematic underfunding of grassroots initiatives, where you have to have already managed a certain amount of money in order to get more money. And so again, the cycle continues, and it continues to exclude frontline, frontline workers and grassroots organizations. So thank you both of you for telling a little bit on that.
Thank you so much. So Stacy,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
up to you. Yeah.
Sure. Oh my goodness, what is missing? I think there's so much missing, but I think, in those things that are missing, that's where the opportunities lie, right? And I myself really felt the resonance of Samira, your comments about how powerful language is and that idea of love, because what I think is really missing is linked to that. The idea that land and the environment are identity for me as an Indigenous people. It's not a commodity, it's my identity. So as I see myself inextricably tied to the land and tied to the environment, that any conversation has to take on a whole different set of words and a whole different set of paradigms. And I think that is missing. We have to be ready to shift some basic paradigms that are very, very deeply entrenched, but it's possible. It's possible for us we have roots as well, and we're growing those roots. Conversations like this are the things that are watering those seeds of the conversations we're having, right? So I think that when we begin to shift paradigms, like the idea that land is an identity, the environment is identity, it's not a commodity, it also helps us shift ideas about equitable access to things like climate finance, to funding, because we have this idea that, as you all mentioned, well, if you demonstrate as an organization, you can manage the money. Here, let's just give you more money. No, we need to reshape the conversation and see what we see as a liability is actually eligibility for an organization. So you're seen as a liability if you haven't managed a lot of funds, sometimes if you're female led, sometimes if you don't have a bank account, and sometimes if you're not incorporated as a company. I think it's fine to reject those traditional corporate structures and instead forge our own and say, great, you don't have a bank account. Well, you can still benefit. Here are some funds that you know how to manage, because if anyone knows how to manage funds, if anyone knows how to make things work, it's female-led organizations who have to, as a woman, we know here on this call, we have to wear so many hats. We have to make things work. We have to balance. So we know what to do. And as you said, as Gabrielle said, let us show you that, because you inadvertently you're learning from us and you're not giving us the credit. So that's definitely missing. I think the idea of equitable access to finance, using Indigenous methods of finance. We have a kind of a collective, it's called a susu, or meeting turn, in our part of the world, where a group of women will come together and once a month say, it's my turn to receive the set of money. Each month you'll put in, say, everyone will put in $50, and then for, say, January, it's my turn to receive that. And then that rotates around the group. Women for generations, for millennia, have been finding out ways to manage their finances and to make sure not just we benefit, because the fact is that when women benefit, communities benefit. And that's something that's proven. That causal link is proven. Okay, so if you're seen as a liability, it's time to change that. That makes us eligible. That makes us more eligible. I think, again, this idea of loss and damage, we have to look at loss and damage and reparations in a way that encompasses not just the tangible loss and damage and the tangible reparations, of the intangible. What is the psychic rupture and the rupture within myself that occurs when I see the coastline that I know has disappeared? What is the dismantling of my cultural practices that happens, and how does that affect me? So there are ways that they're intangible, but they're just as valid, if not more so, than money necessarily. And I think, as you say, the word reparations, everyone gets nervous because they seem to think, oh, that means that people want money. No, it's not just money. Money is can be very little. It's about the restoration of a sense of self and a restoration and a kind of community healing. That's a very important aspect of the conversation that I think is missing. I think something else then is this idea we have to recognize that colonialism and neocolonialism comes in many forms. And there are many ways that in the current landscape, I see philanthropy is being wielded as a tool of neocolonialism or green colonialism, as I like to put it. Because here, yeah, we'll give you this money if you do A, B, C, and if you do it with X, Y, Z and these people. Any kind of funding or any kind of grant, it has to enable you, it has to empower communities and meet communities where they are. And it's not for outsiders to dictate the terms of how this funding should be used and how it should be delegated. And there's also not just funding, there's also in-kind knowledge, there's capacity building, there's training sessions, and recognize that this is not something that you can say, oh, well, this grant cycle or this project cycle, let's have it do for 4 months and then that's it. No, you have to follow up. You have to build on things that have been done instead of, we mentioned again in this conversation, things just starting all over again. So it just becomes a cycle, and it's not a cycle that's moving us forward. So those are some of the things I think are missing. And I think conversations like what we're having and bringing us together, it's a start to then building a basis that we can act on. So thank you all for bringing us together.
Thank you so much. It's amazing. Thank you, thank you. So, my next question is still a common question. And what tension exists between local knowledge and global system? And also, I want to add scientist knowledge also, because sometimes they separate indigenous knowledge, local knowledge to scientist knowledge. Thank you. Gabriella, you want to start first?
Well, I think it's to do usually it's this is a very interesting question because usually you don't really know what is happening. I think it's mainly because people just go and take the knowledge without acknowledging them, looking down on their knowledge as if it's nothing because they don't have degrees or they don't speak the good English language you're speaking and don't have platforms for themselves. So we usually, unfortunately, take advantage of that and take the credits for ourselves as, oh, we're the ones who do the research and have all the knowledge. I think that that has brought a lot of tension to them. Also because they usually don't have the platform that some researchers might get compared to them. But yeah, I think that is the main thing I can see what shows the connection. And also the fact that they are just not regarded, they are just seen as people, just people, people who can actually contribute to anything. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Samira, you want to go for this question?
Yes, I can just maybe give a few quick remarks. I think that one thing that is extremely detrimental to the global knowledge system, it's really its rigidity to accept other form of knowledge sharing. One thing that I see is that when it came to defining what is knowledge, how is it relevant, most often those kind of format frameworks have been defined in certain contexts in what is considered the global north by certain people who are generally white males who have decided on what is the framework of knowledge that is credible for the entire earth. And if you don't fall within that, then it's extremely hard to be recognized. And if you're not recognized, then it's really hard to actually protect or to be able to approach practice care within your community when you are impacted by something that is global. So to me, what is missing is trying to be more flexible, trying to be more open in what we consider as credible sources of knowledge. Because for my community, for example, sources of knowledge are through peer sharings, are through lineage sharings, are through experience. And those things are hard to define in a really quantified metric way but they're still there. They still produce results at the end of the day, and that are protective results. They are more holistic in their approach, and they are also oral, not something that is written and framed within rigidity of the paper in and of itself. But they are still, through those practices, um, they're still way of community creation and protection, as I was saying. So how can we make sure that we transfer those forms of knowledge in a way that is recognizable and understandable in the global majority, but that also creates enough trust so that they can lead to concrete action like financing or things like that. Not only that, but how can we make sure that this bridge is something that exists? So I would say that this is one of the main tensions that I see.
Okay, thank you so much. And for you about what about the how we can also because we know we have tension between local scientists, local traditional knowledge through scientist knowledge. So how we can also through your work at the international framework level, how we can move forward from that, and how we can also see the local traditional knowledge at the same level at the scientist knowledge, because sometimes the scientists they go to uh, their indigenous villages, indigenous localities, and do some interview, talk to them, and bring it and write an article, scientists, and put it. It's a scientist knowledge, but about this knowledge, as you say that, as also we talk about that during this discussion, how also at the international, at the global framework, we can do better and change this perspective.
Okay, so I think you want to take that, Samira, as a question, and then I'll talk after. Sorry, you're muted. I'm Amy.
Oh, sorry. I say it was for Samira, yes, but after Stacy, you can also go. Samira, go ahead, please.
I can try to answer quickly. To me, I must say that at this point, I don't really have the answer for that. I'm still like struggling with this question, how to make sure that we are that knowledge is really recognized. Um, for me, one of the main things that I've already raised is the issue of trust. We need to be able to trust that the knowledge that indigenous and local communities have is enough, and that it doesn't need to pass some of the criteria that have been set by people far away. And that trust can be built through experience and as you mentioned, people sharing, coming and seeing the direct effect and direct impacts. So through being able to experience effects and impact, then we should be able to trust each other that this is actually working, and it doesn't need to exist through other frameworks than the one that has been created within. So that would be my first element of answer, as I'm still pondering over that question. But yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to.
Yeah, thank you so much, Samira, for that. And what I just want to add also, Stacy talk about the intangible also knowledge when we talk about the loss and damage. And I think we already have all the framework that we need. If we move to UNESCO, we have the cultural heritage framework. And in this framework, we don't have climate inside. It's just about culture, folklore, etc. It's interesting, but we need to bring climate inside. We need to bring something more science inside. So, Stacey, you can go. You can go.
Sure, yeah, I think definitely leading, I'll link the questions together, the idea of the tension that exists and how can we draw more attention to indigenous knowledge systems and practices. I think the tension that exists, one of the problems is that unless it's a victim story, very few people want to hear about not just the resilience, but who are Indigenous people outside of the victim narrative? And that's something that we have to challenge. We have to start telling the stories and celebrating Indigenous identities that are not rooted in necessarily resilience, because resilience kind of implies that, oh, well, there's a struggle, and now we're overcoming that. Yes, there is, but there are ways in which there's joy. Let's use joy as resistance. Let's tell stories of joy, and let's also tell the stories in a way that will capture the attention and help people to understand on an emotional level and not just on an intellectual level. And that's the tension as well, right? We think we need to sanitize things or make things intellectually appealing. But one of the most powerful ways I've heard climate justice stories being told is through a popular theater collective group here in Barbados of female fisherfolk who created theater pieces and poems about their experiences, particular in the aftermath of Hurricane Beryl. And they made a presentation in a room full of policymakers, and everybody instantly, if you didn't understand what climate justice was before, you did after you heard those women's stories, their poems, their songs, and the short skits that they did, which demonstrated in a way that was palpable. The heart of climate justice lies in the fact that what is happening in this climate will affect me differently as someone who is Indigenous or someone as a fish folk than it will affect you. So it's a matter of equity, not equality. I am going to need some different building blocks and sometimes some more substantial building blocks to build myself back up. So I think that's the tension. The tension is that there's this victim narrative and that we have to learn to hear stories of joy and hear the identity in the heart of that joy. And then also the idea of, Amy, you were saying that UNESCO will separate heritage from what's happening with climate. So let's reinvigorate the intersectionality that it's that has become another buzzword, but that's something again for millennia, Indigenous people in the global South. We see everything linked together because everything is linked together. And we feel that at an instinctive level. So let's bring back the intersectionality to the conversations and just start linking things the best we can and to really highlight those stories. Even a session like this, these are the stories I've heard from Samira, from Gabriella. I will put together something, say, to put on LinkedIn, or I will put together something on social media. I will tell the story of this to another group. And it's that, again, that oral retelling, that oral harnessing of what we're experiencing. It's going to start a ripple effect. So that's something I really believe can happen. Yeah.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing this. It's so important because when we talk about adaptation, the indigenous and local and Afro-descendants people, they still adapt to the climate change and lost biodiversity loss. So I think it's also important to considerate that. Thank you. Angeline, you want to add something before moving to the third question?
Yeah, I guess in a lot of ways, I feel like this, what we're talking about with indigenous or local knowledge and then global knowledge, and then this like trying to demystify it, as I mentioned, was one of the main reasons that we started this project to begin with, was to really platform and give the opportunity to individuals that are, let's say, not older white guys in a university, to talk about, yeah, their own little niches of climate justice. So whether that be gender and climate, indigenous culture and climate, or yeah, we did a separate section also on unpacking the EU Green Deal from different perspectives, like from a decolonial perspective. And I think it's very much a gut instinct to put these two kinds of knowledge at odds, when in reality, I think that one of the reasons that indigenous or local knowledge continues to be seen on kind of this lower and less serious level is just because of neocolonialism and this kind of perpetuation of what is clean, what is like fresh, what is new and valuable versus what is old or out of time. And there's an example that one of my colleagues, my wonderful boss, Anila, uses about recycling. And she's originally from Pakistan, and she was always talking about how, yeah, recycling now it's billed as this like fancy new thing, and it's in reality just been around for generations and generations and generations. But now that, like, let's say global north or global superpowers are doing it and billing it as this like company where you can go and be a part of a community by taking your cans to the recycling, that now it's a fun fresh new thing, and it was never that way. But just because of the perception let's say like what is deemed as valuable, we yeah, we just see these two things at odds, and they're not. And many of these, let's say, new greenwashy techniques that we're seeing a lot are in reality just directly lifted from local and indigenous knowledge. So yeah, I think recognizing the roots in, let's say, new knowledge, that's something that's really important to me when we're talking about this, different kinds of knowledge. So thank you for sharing
Thank
your
you
examples.
so much. And that's bring me to the next question. So, how can indigenous and ancestral knowledge be better recognized? You talk about a little bit on that, and you, Angeline, share that with us. So, for each of our speaker, if you can share with us, how can indigenous and ancestral knowledge be better recognized? Thank you.
Well, I'll start and just say I think it can be better recognized by not just giving it the credit it deserves, but recognizing that we are all, to some extent, living, walking, breathing examples of this knowledge. So let's start to frame the way we think as such, and always include either reference to Indigenous knowledge systems in anything we write, in anything that we want to create, and recognize that this type of knowledge, it's so much more healing than the type of knowledge that can be divisive. So if we see the recognition of it, again, intersectionality, link the recognition of Indigenous knowledge systems to other things and to the positive ripple effect that it will have to with everyone. Okay, everyone will feel the difference. So we start to adopt the practices that are part and parcel of Indigenous knowledge systems. So if you're an educator, start to look at more collaborative ways of learning in your classroom. Start to look at ways that you can even change the physical layout of your classroom. In a lot of Western or colonial models of education, the teacher sits at the front. And I remember when I was at school, it was on a raised platform as if to signify symbolically and literally that I'm above you as a teacher. Have a circular arrangement in the room, change who is necessarily at the center of that circle so that people can share their lived experience. When you are creating this idea of testing, I personally don't believe in testing. I don't think that people should be ranked. I know that it's difficult as an educator working within the system, but the way Indigenous knowledge can be better recognized is, for example, use collective ways of learning and experiential learning and what is it you're trying to assess? So you're not necessarily trying to assess the way that someone can repeat or regurgitate the same set of knowledge. You're assessing how are you cooperating with your classmate? How are you trying to impart that knowledge to me? Not that you do it perfectly, but are you making an effort to share? Is it something that you're going home to think about, to maybe talk to the adults or the other people in your classroom? Will you, for example, come the next week and say, oh, well, I looked at this some more and want to share that knowledge? So even that. So I think those are some of the ways it can be better recognized. Let's start to bring the paradigms of Indigenous knowledge systems into our work and everything we do, even into our parenting, if we're parents. And I think that's something that will go a long way for sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stacy. Samira, do you want to go?
Yes, to me, recognition of indigenous and ancestral knowledge starts with the recognition of the people themselves as being integral, full community that are complex and really there is a variety of them. Generally, I feel like when we talk about indigenous people, we are talking about, oh, this is one group of they have the same culture, same knowledge, but no, actually, we have quite complex various groups of people who don't often know each other, but are trying to interact with each other so that they can be part of like the global systems. Uh, I'm I'm talking about this in particular because through my work at the ICG on the ICG advisory opinion, we tried to make sure that indigenous people were able to share their own knowledge in that particular process in the international scale. And it was really hard for, I guess, this structure that was extremely complex and that was extremely rigid to accept that various indigenous people could participate as being their own people, not attached to a state, that they could participate in this particular proceeding. So in the end, we're not able to have indigenous groups participate in the conversation. So I found it quite damaging actually to the process. So being able to recognize indigenous nations and as having their own voice, not needing to be attached to a state, and as being legitimate by themselves is of first importance to be able to recognize the knowledge that they're sharing. So
Yes, thank you. It's amazing thought that you share with us, Samira. Thank you so much. Gabriella, that's it for you.
Yes, you said it all. Everyone has made very valid points on how we can develop our ancestral knowledge and indigenous knowledge. Like she said, we should acknowledge the people themselves. That's the most critical, most important aspect of that. And also, we couldn't treat it as a way of saving the past, but resourcing our future as well. Because these are things that we build on, and even it's still on some of the things that they know is still happening. So some of the things are still current, it's just not well documented. So another thing is to get historians who are very interested to document these things and get them a niche inside whatever we are doing, make them a part of what we are doing in building the nation and building our communities. Let their voices be heard as well. Let them have a major food on the table as well.
Thank you, Gabriella. Thank you so much. So Angeline, do you want to before yes, Stacy, you can go also if you want to add something. Yeah.
I just wanted to add, I think that idea, the concept of self-determination is really, really important. That's something that's important that lies at the heart of Indigenous identity. And also that one of the issues that many Indigenous populations face in, for example, the Caribbean region is that there is no constitutional recognition of you as a group within countries' laws. But that does not mean that you do not have rights, and it does not mean that you cannot seek self-determination and also link that to land tenure rights, because that's something else that's very critical if you're going to defend the land. Not that, again, that you're falling into the model of land as commodity, but how are you going to establish that you yourself, you're the custodian and that your ancestral right to the land. Okay, so I think the idea of self-determination is something that as Indigenous people, and not necessarily to box yourself into a category, as we said, because that's a problem, right? There's this idea of I think it's couched in that philosophy of what I call the noble savage, that all Indigenous people are alike and we're all, wearing loincloths and we're outside, smiling and singing and waving at the sun. And there's so many, aspects of Indigenous identity. Again, we're people. So we have many, many different categorizations of ourselves and our emotions on who we are, right? So that's something important. Let's recognize, as you said, pay homage to that complexity, because it's that complexity that makes us human, and it's that complexity that will help us to share each other's experience and to give grace and space to the conversations that highlight all their experiences. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Angeline, you want to add something before the closing remarks?
Yeah, just a little bit. I I wasn't there for a little bit of this section, but I wanted to kind of draw a similarity with what you were saying just now, Stacey, about this kind of vision of what Indigenous people are or what they're doing, and like how this connection to nature actually looks. I think is something that is super under accurately represented, if that makes sense. So I think also having like meaningful opportunities to platform the work that Indigenous people and Indigenous groups are doing, so that we can kind of break this single story of, we're not all holding hands and looking at the sun, but also, let's say, like the tending to coastal regions or specific projects, as you were showing also, Stacey, about the work that you do with youth groups. I think that, yeah, having meaningful opportunities to showcase this kind of work can really help to inspire meaningful change around, okay, Indigenous knowledge, it's impactful, it's practical, and it's sustainable. So that was kind of, yeah, my wrap up on this section. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your bits, and Amy for handing it over to me.
Thank you so much. So it was a small group, but it was very amazing discussion. I learned a lot. And I hope we can go also forward. I don't know, maybe a policy paper or something that to share. It will be good. So I think it will be interesting to keep in touch. I will send an email with a report, and it's also interesting to see how we can move forward. So we are going to the end of this session, but before I will let you to have a closing remarks, each of you. Thank you.
I'll go.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. It was an amazing panel. I learned a lot. I really can't pronounce what Stacey, um, ran, the group of people, the indigenous people that you mentioned. I haven't heard of them, and it was really insightful. And also to Samira and Angeline, really, really great remarks and contributions. And I would love to see this move forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Samira, you can go.
Yes, thank you. I'm also super grateful for that conversation. I felt like I learned a lot. And actually having a little space like this was actually quite great for the conversation to go. So I like
Yeah.
that format actually. And I just would like to finish by saying that um, starting by lived realities to be able to go to the global is a really important route for me. And I think that we should start from there when deciding on the global climate decisions that we're all taking, and that it's through those lived reality that we're actually able to enforce with care and love the climate solution that we're proposing.
Thank you so much, Samira, and keep doing your work at the international level. We need it. Thank you. Yes, Stacy.
Yeah, I have to echo the sentiment and say thanks so much. It was great to be in this space where we could talk, we could be ourselves, and we didn't have to be afraid to talk about things that are necessarily uncomfortable. Because when we talk about these things, the intention is not to make you uncomfortable. The intention is to let's learn from each other. There's not judgment. And I think that's something that we have to always remember in these spaces moving forward, to listen to each other and to try to empathize with what's happening to all of us in this world as it currently is, and to say, yes, I can see, I'm totally like blown away by the work everyone does. I remember, I mean, I've met Amy and Gabriella in Brazil, and I remember sitting next to Gabriella in the bus and you talking to me about oyster farming, and I just thought it was the greatest thing ever, and I'd never heard of it, and I thought the work you were doing was so great. And as you said, it's not recognized enough, right? And I came home and I was telling everybody, oh, about this oyster farming, and we need to tell each other stories. And Samir, I've heard of your work, so I was trying to act very professional and not fangirl as we were on the call, because I've heard of your work, and I think as someone young, you're doing so much, and let's keep just like lifting each other up and encouraging and helping each other. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gabriella, Stacy, and Samira. I will let Angeline post the discussion. Thank you again.
Thank you, Amy, for holding the space and also for bringing such wonderful speakers in today. As yeah, echoing what everyone already was talking about, but it's been so lovely to hear also about each of your beautiful corners of the world, and know all the work that you're doing both, yeah, on a local and on a more, yeah, bigger scale. So thanks everyone for bringing that open-mindedness, hearts, passion to today's session. And it was truly, truly lovely to hear not only about the work that you do, but also the people that you are and how you relate yourself with this important subject. So thank you. For the participants, I'll be sending an evaluation, and for the lovely speakers and all of that, I'll make sure to keep you guys in the loop as well. And hopefully this is the beginning of a bit more of a long-term fruitful relationship, because I think you're all really lovely. So thanks again for making some time to be here today. We're doing another coffee table session on the 8th of June. That's going to be about climate displacement. So I'll also make sure to keep you guys in the loop on that. So hopefully see you all on the 8th of June. And
Thank
for
you
those
so
that can't make
much.
it, take
Yeah, and
care.
thank you, Michelle,
Thanks,
for the
everyone.
translation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.